was deafening. Admiral Zefkar, hero of 12 campaigns and savior of 3-star systems, stood before his most trusted officers with blood still fresh on his armor. His 4 eyes, usually bright with tactical brilliance, now held a darkness that made even battle-hardened veterans shift uncomfortably in their seats. "You want to know why we're losing?" His voice, normally commanding and sure, cracked like old leather. "It pushed our mighty hegemony to the brink of collapse." The assembled officers, Krillian shock troopers, Veltar strategists, Noxian fleet commanders, all species that had conquered countless worlds, leaned forward. They had fought alongside humans for months now, these strange bipedal creatures from a backwater planet called Earth. But something had changed in their celebrated admiral after the last joint operation. "I've seen what they really are," Zefkar continued, his claws scraping against the metal table. "And by the void, we should have never let them out of their solar system." The room erupted in confused murmurs. Humans were their allies now, weren't they? The enemy was the Devourer Swarm, the ancient machine intelligence that consumed entire galaxies. But as Admiral Zefkar began to speak of what he had witnessed in the depths of human nature, his words would shatter everything they thought they knew about their newest and most terrifying partners in this cosmic war. What had the humans done that could shake a warrior who had stared into the heart of dying stars and never flinched? What truth about Earth's children was so devastating that it left the galaxy's greatest military mind questioning everything he had ever believed about civilization, warfare, and survival itself? The answer would change not just how they fought this war, but whether any of them would survive to see its end. Admiral Zethkar's hands trembled as he poured another glass of Krillian fire wine, the amber liquid glowing faintly in the dim light of his private quarters. The battle reports scattered across his desk told a story that should have been impossible. Human forces achieving victory ratios that defied every principle of warfare his people had developed over millennia. 3 days had passed since the joint operation on Zerion Prime, and he still couldn't shake the images from his mind. He had fought beside many species in his long career. The stone-hearted Krillians with their unbreakable discipline, the quick-thinking Veltar with their genius-level tactical minds, the massive Thorkin berserkers who could tear through armor with their bare hands. But what he had witnessed the humans do in that underground complex? A soft chime announced a visitor. Commander Lyrics entered, her blue-scaled features showing the same confusion that had plagued all of them lately. As his intelligence officer, she had been trying to make sense of human combat reports for weeks. "Admiral, the human delegation has arrived for the debriefing," she said, her voice carefully neutral. Zethkar nodded slowly. "Send them in. And Lyrics, record everything. Our superiors will need to see this." The delegation filed in. Captain Sarah Chen, a small human female whose calm demeanor had consistently unnerved alien officers twice her size. Lieutenant Marcus Wright, whose boyish face hid tactical instincts that had saved 3 Veltar cruisers in the last engagement. And Sergeant Elena Vasquez, a human soldier who had single-handedly held a position against 50 Devourer drones for 6 hours. "Please sit," Zethkar gestured to the chairs arranged around his conference table. The humans sat with that peculiar grace that characterized their species. Economical movement that spoke of constant readiness for violence. "Captain Chen," Zethkar began, his voice steadier than he felt. "Your species has been fighting alongside us for 8 months now. In that time, you have consistently exceeded our tactical projections by factors that our computers initially rejected as impossible." Captain Chen's dark eyes remained fixed on his. "We're glad to contribute to the Alliance, Admiral."
Contribute?
Zefkar tasted the word like poison.
Yes, that's one way to put it.
"Tell me, Captain, what is your species' military doctrine based on?" The question seemed to surprise her. "I'm not sure I understand, sir." "Every species in the hegemony has developed their warfare principles around specific strengths, discipline, and coordination. The Veltar focus on technological superiority and tactical flexibility. The Thorkin rely on individual prowess and overwhelming force. What drives human military thinking?" The 3 humans exchanged glances, a quick communication in that subtle body language their species had perfected. Captain Chen spoke carefully. "We adapt to whatever the situation requires, Admiral." "Adapt." Zethkar's claws clicked against the table. Such a simple word for such a complex reality. I have been reviewing footage from Zirium Prime, Captain. Represent the temperature of the Roman capital. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Lieutenant Wright shifted slightly, his hand unconsciously moving toward where his sidearm would normally rest. Sergeant Vasquez remained motionless, but Zethkar's enhanced senses caught the minute change in her breathing pattern. Project. The Devourer Complex, Chen said flatly. Yes. Zethkar activated his holographic display, bringing up the tactical map of the underground facility. 30. The mission was designated as reconnaissance and data recovery. Standard infiltration protocol. Their team was assigned to provide support for the primary Veltar tech specialists. Their complex layout. 17 levels of tunnels and chambers carved into the asteroid's core. Red markers indicated known Devourer positions. B. Blue markers showed the planned infiltration route. The mission proceeded normally for the first 3 levels. Zethkar continued. Textbook operation. The Veltar teams located the primary data cores. Your humans provided excellent perimeter security. And then, he paused, manipulating the display to show level 4. Something went wrong. The chamber shown was larger than the others, its walls lined with the organic mechanical hybrid structures that the Devourer swarm used to process captured beings. In the center, dozens of cocoons hung from the ceiling, some containing recognizable forms of various hegemony species, others holding shapes that had been altered. The Devourers had been conducting experiments, Lieutenant Wright said quietly. Trying to integrate captured personnel into their collective. Yes. Zethkar nodded. Standard Devourer behavior. The mission parameters were clear. Document the facility and withdraw. The captured personnel were beyond saving according to our medical experts. A seizure spoke for the first time, her voice carrying an edge that made Zethkar's skin crawl. Were they? According to every protocol developed by every species in the hegemony over 3 centuries of fighting the swarm, yes. The process is irreversible after 48 hours. The subjects become part of the collective consciousness. But you didn't tell us that, Captain Chen said. The admission hung in the air like a weapon. Zethkar felt the weight of it, the implications spreading like ripples through his understanding of everything that had happened since. No, he said finally. Routine, we didn't. Because we wanted to see what your people would do. The hologram shifted, showing helmet camera footage from the operation. Zethkar watched his guests' faces as they relived the moment that had changed everything. The recording showed the chamber from a human perspective, the cocoons hanging like grotesque fruit, the soft pulsing of machinery that kept the captured beings alive while slowly rewriting their neural patterns. The Veltar team leader's voice came through clearly. Documentation complete. The beginning withdrawal is the humans had stopped. What are you doing? The Veltar officer's voice demanded. On recording, Captain Chen's voice was steady but carried an undertone that had made Zethkar's blood run cold when he first heard it. How many? How many what? How many are still alive in there? That's irrelevant. Beyond. How many? The pause that followed was filled with the low humming of Devourer machinery. Then, reluctantly, 43 confirmed life signs. But Captain, the integration process, is that your medical opinion or tactical doctrine? Another pause. Tactical doctrine. What happened next had been recorded by 17 different helmet cameras from the Joint Operation Team. Zethkar had watched it 43 times, each viewing revealing new details that had shaken his understanding of warfare to its core. The humans had simply looked at each other for perhaps 3 seconds. No verbal communication, no apparent signal. And then, as if controlled by a single mind, they had acted. Lieutenant Wright had begun downloading the facility's schematics into his tactical computer. Sergeant Vasquez had started a detailed scan of the cocoon suspension systems. Captain Chen had contacted the human medical officer aboard their ship. What are you doing? The Veltar team leader had demanded again. Getting them out, Chen had replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the universe. The mission parameters just changed. Zethkar paused the recording and looked at his guests. The next 4 hours of footage has been classified at the highest levels of hegemony command. Do you know why? None of the humans answered, but he could see they remembered every moment. Because what your species did in that chamber violated every principle of warfare we have ever developed. You ignored direct orders. You abandoned mission parameters. You risked the entire operation for 43 beings that every military doctrine in the galaxy classified as already lost. He leaned forward, his four eyes focusing intently on their faces, and you succeeded. The weight of that statement filled the room. Succeeded was such a small word for what had actually happened. The humans hadn't just rescued the captured personnel. They had done so while fighting through 17 levels of Devourer defenses, adapting their tactics in real time as the enemy responded, and maintaining mission security throughout. But that wasn't the part that kept Zethkar awake at night. The Velter medical assessment was correct, he continued. The integration process was irreversible. By every metric we use to define life, consciousness, and individual identity, those 43 beings were already dead. Sergeant Vasquez's jaw tightened slightly. But they weren't. No, Zethkar agreed. They weren't. Your medical officer, Dr. Patricia Zhang, performed procedures that our best scientists had classified as theoretically impossible. She didn't just extract the Devourer neural implants, she reversed the integration process itself. The hologram shifted to show medical bay footage, the rescued personnel slowly awakening, their minds intact despite having been partially absorbed into the swarm's collective consciousness. It was a medical miracle that had resulted in several hegemony research teams requesting immediate consultations with human doctors. 17 different species had been captured in that facility, Zethkar said, including 3 that were completely unknown to human medical science. Dr. Zhang treated them all successfully. When asked how, she said she had figured it out as she went along. Captain Chen's expression hadn't changed, but Zethkar caught the slight tightening around her eyes. She was proud of her people's achievement. "This is what disturbs you?" she asked. "That we saved lives?" "No, Captain." Zethkar's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "What disturbs me is how easily you did it. How naturally your people adapted to challenges that would have stopped any other species in the galaxy. How you looked at an impossible situation and simply refused to accept the impossibility." He stood and walked to the observation window, gazing out at the fleet of ships hanging in space around them. Human vessels moved among the alien craft with an efficiency that should have taken decades to develop. "I have been studying your species' combat reports, Captain. Every engagement, every tactical decision, every moment where human forces have interacted with ours. Do you want to know what I've discovered?" The humans waited. "You don't fight like a military," he said finally. "You fight like a force of nature. Radical, inexorable, adaptive, and utterly without regard for what should be possible." Commander Lyrix had been silent throughout the conversation, but now she activated her own holographic display. "Station analysis, Admiral." Zethkar nodded grimly. The display showed a detailed breakdown of human performance metrics compared to other hegemony forces over the past 8 months. The numbers were staggering. Human forces have achieved an average casualty ratio of 147 against Devourer drones, Lyrix reported, her voice clinical. The next closest ratio belongs to the Thorkin shock troops at 112% of assigned objectives compared to the hegemony average of 73%. Most significantly, human forces have never, not once, failed to adapt to a new Devourer tactic within the span of a single engagement. Protocol, finally in the air like an accusation. "That last point is mathematically impossible," Zethkar said, turning back to face his guests. "Adaptation on that scale requires either prescient tactical planning or what, Admiral?" Captain Chen asked quietly. Zethkar's claws extended slightly, an involuntary response to stress that he tried to control. "Or your species has experience fighting enemies that adapt as quickly as the Devourer swarm." The silence that followed was profound. Outside the observation window, the starfield wheeled slowly as the command ship maintained its orbital position. Finally, Lieutenant Wright spoke. "Admiral, with respect, humans have been fighting adaptive enemies for our entire evolutionary history." "Elaborate." Wright glanced at his companions before continuing. "Every war we've ever fought has been against other humans. Every tactical innovation, every strategic doctrine, every psychological warfare technique, we developed them fighting against opponents who were just as intelligent, just as adaptable, and just as creative as we were. Del Zethkar's spine. Every other species in the hegemony had evolved as the dominant intelligence on their homeworld. But they had developed warfare primarily as a tool for conquest against less adaptable species. But humans, you're saying your species learned to fight by fighting yourselves? Commander Lyrics asked, her tone incredulous. For thousands of years, Sergeant Vasquez confirmed, against enemies who knew all our strengths and weaknesses because they shared them. Against opponents who could predict our tactics because they thought the same way we did.
Captain Chen leaned forward slightly.
Admiral, what did you think would happen when you put a species like that up against an enemy that adapts through absorption and imitation rather than innovation? The question hit Zethkar like a physical blow. The Devourer swarm's primary strength was its ability to adapt by incorporating the tactical knowledge of conquered species. It was a formidable advantage against species that fought in predictable patterns based on their biological and cultural limitations, but against a species that had evolved specifically to fight opponents who could predict and counter their every move. You've been fighting the swarm the same way you fight each other, he realized. Not exactly, Wright said. We've been fighting them the way we fight a human enemy that's trying to fight like us. The swarm adapts by copying. We adapt by innovating. They're always one step behind. Zethkar's tactical mind began working through the implications, and what he found terrified him more than any Devourer assault fleet. Captain, he said slowly, what percentage of human military capability have you been deploying in this conflict? The pause before Chen answered told him everything he needed to know.
That's classified information, Admiral.
Another exchange of glances between the humans. Less than we used against ourselves in our last major planetary conflict, she said finally. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Zethkar felt the room spinning slightly as his mind processed what he had just learned. Town. The humans had been holding back. These tactical miracles, these impossible adaptations, these casualty ratios that defied every principle of warfare, they represented a fraction of human military potential. How much less, he whispered. Captain Chen's expression softened slightly, and for a moment he saw something in her eyes that might have been sympathy. Admiral, she said gently, perhaps that's a conversation for another day. But Zethkar knew there might not be another day. Because as he looked at these three humans, these representatives of a species that fought the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known as if it were a minor inconvenience, he realized that the hegemony had made a terrible miscalculation. They had assumed humanity would be grateful to join their alliance. They had thought Earth's children would be eager students, learning warfare from species with millennia of experience. Instead, they had unleashed something that made the Devourer swarm look predictable by comparison. And the humans were only getting started. The debriefing had ended 3 hours ago, but Admiral Zethkar remained in his quarters, staring at the data scrolling across his multiple screens. Each report painted a picture that grew more disturbing with every detail. Human tactical innovations that appeared overnight. Combat techniques that violated basic principles of physics. Medical procedures that shouldn't have been possible with their current technology level. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Enter, he called, not bothering to look up from the stream of data. A Commander Lyric stepped inside carrying a data pad and wearing an expression that Zethkar had learned to associate with very bad news. Admiral, you need to see this. She activated the holographic display and immediately the room filled with tactical readouts from the past week's operations. But these weren't the sanitized reports he had been reviewing. These were raw intelligence feeds, unfiltered and unedited.
I've been digging deeper into human combat performance, Lyric said, her voice tight with tension.
The pattern is even more disturbing than we thought. The first recording showed a human squad pinned down by Devourer hunters in an asteroid field. Standard tactical response would be to call for support and maintain defensive positions until extraction. Instead, the humans had done something that made Zethkar's blood run cold. They had split up. In any other species' military doctrine, this would be considered suicide. A single soldier against Devourer hunters was dead within minutes. But the human squad leader, a young woman named Corporal Lisa Park, had calmly divided her 8-person team into 4 groups of 2.
Watch their coordination, Lyric said, highlighting movement patterns on the display.
What followed was a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. Each pair of humans moved independently, using the asteroid field's complex geometry to create overlapping fields of fire while maintaining constant motion. They communicated through subtle hand signals and micro-expressions that the aliens' recording equipment could barely detect. But that wasn't the disturbing part. Look at the Devourer response. Lyrics pointed to enemy movement patterns. The Devourer hunters, operating with their typical hive mind coordination, had tried to adapt to the humans' tactics. They began splitting their own forces, attempting to mirror the human strategy. It should have worked. The Devourers had superior numbers and enhanced combat capabilities. Instead, the human pairs immediately shifted tactics again and again. Day and again. They're not following any doctrine, Zethkar observed, his voice barely above a whisper. No, Lyrics agreed. They're improvising in real time. But look at this. She zoomed in on one of the human pairs. Corporal Park and Private Morrison had never served together before this mission. They had exactly 12 minutes of joint training. The implication hit Zethkar like a physical blow. These weren't carefully rehearsed tactics. The humans were making it up as they went along, adapting not just to enemy actions but to their own teammates' capabilities and limitations, all while under lethal fire. How many Devourer units were destroyed in this engagement, he asked, though he dreaded the answer. All of them. 23 hunter units, completely eliminated. Human casualties, 0. Zethkar closed all 4 of his eyes and tried to process what he was seeing. In 3 centuries of fighting the Devourer swarm, no hegemony force had ever achieved a perfect victory against hunter units. The best tactical minds in the galaxy considered a 3-1 casualty ratio against hunters to be an exceptional result. Show me another example, he said. The next recording was from the Titan Nebula operation. A human destroyer, the U.S. Defiance, had been separated from the main fleet when Devourer forces emerged from hyperspace. The ship was outnumbered 50-1, with no support vessels within 3 hours travel time. Standard protocol would be immediate retreat, Lyrics noted. Instead, Captain Rodriguez of the Defiance had done something that violated every principle of space combat. He had charged directly into the center of the Devourer formation. Suicide attack? Zethkar asked. Watch. The Defiance's trajectory seemed suicidal for exactly 47 seconds. Then the human ship began a series of maneuvers that defied both physics and logic. It used the gravitational fields of 3 different asteroids to create a slingshot effect that accelerated it far beyond its rated maximum velocity. It fired its main weapons not at enemy ships, but at specific points in space that would intersect with Devourer flight paths 3 seconds later. Most impossibly, it had somehow used its own exhaust trail as a weapon, creating a plasma corridor that disabled 6 Devourer vessels without firing a single torpedo. The Devourers adapted, Lyrics continued. They began predicting the Defiance's trajectory based on gravitational calculations. They should have been able to trap it within 4 minutes. But the human ship had anticipated this response. Captain Rodriguez had been using the first series of maneuvers to gather data on devouring tactical patterns. Once he understood how they thought, he had simply started doing things that made no tactical sense. The recording showed the Defiance performing a barrel roll while firing its main guns backward, using the recoil to alter its trajectory in a way that no tactical computer could predict. It had launched its escape pods not to evacuate crew, but as decoys that mimicked the ship's energy signature. The crew had paid back in the palace to do all weights of this turn, as anyone stirred. And security participated to the Buckingham Palace.
Casualties? Zethkar asked weakly.
The Defiance took minor hull damage, 41 Devourer ships destroyed. The human crew celebrated by playing something called music over the communication channels. Zethkar stared at the tactical display, trying to understand how a single human ship had turned a hopeless situation into a complete victory through pure improvisation. Every maneuver the Defiance had performed was technically possible, but no computer would ever recommend them because they were too unpredictable, too risky, too human. There's more, Lyrics said grimly. She activated a new display showing intelligence reports from across the entire theater of operations. The data painted a picture that made Zethkar's earlier fears seem naive. I've analyzed human performance across 237 separate engagements, Lyrics explained. The pattern is consistent. web faculty securities, they actively seek out scenarios that would challenge other species and then invent solutions that shouldn't be possible. The display showed graphs and charts documenting human tactical innovation. Humans encountered a new type of devourer unit or tactic every 2.3 days. The expected adaptation period for developing effective countermeasures was 4.6 weeks based on every other species' performance. Humans averaged 47 minutes, the person said flatly. The data doesn't lie, Admiral. The data doesn't lie, Admiral. Humans are encountering unknown threats and developing effective countermeasures faster than our computers can process the tactical problems. But the most disturbing revelation was yet to come. Admiral, I accessed the human military databases to try to understand their training methods. Zethkar looked up sharply. That's classified information. I had clearance from Captain Chen. She said we needed to understand if we were going to work together effectively. Lyric's expression grew troubled. Admiral, everything we've seen, the tactical innovation, the impossible adaptations, the refusal to accept defeat, this isn't special training or advanced technology. Go to Palace. What do you mean? This is how they always fight. These aren't elite units or special forces. These are standard human military personnel, trained according to doctrines that every human soldier learns. The implications of that statement sent ice through Zethkar's veins. If what Lyrics was saying was true, then every human in their armed forces was capable of the tactical miracles he had been witnessing. Show me their training doctrine, he said. The holographic display shifted to show excerpts from human military manuals. Zethkar read with growing horror. The enemy's greatest weapon is predictability. Never do what the enemy expects, even if conventional tactics would be more efficient. Is unique. Doctrine provides a starting point, not a limiting factor. Initiative and creativity are more valuable than strict adherence to protocol. The primary goal of military training is not to teach soldiers what to think, but how to think. Adaptation is survival. If you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough. Victory through any means necessary is preferable to defeat through honorable methods. Zethkar stared at the last entry in disbelief. They teach their soldiers to cheat? It gets worse, Admiral. Look at this. The display showed training footage from human military academies. Zethkar watched as human cadets participated in war games that seemed designed to be impossible. Scenarios where they were outnumbered, outgunned, and given objectives that violated the basic laws of physics. And they won. Consistently. How? He whispered. By refusing to accept the limitations of the scenario, Lyrics explained. Watch this exercise. The footage showed a group of human cadets tasked with capturing a fortified position defended by superior forces. The conventional approach would require massive casualties and might still fail. Instead, the humans had done something that made Zethkar's tactical mind real. They had convinced the defenders to surrender by faking a plague outbreak. They released harmless bacteria that produced visible symptoms similar to a deadly disease, Lyrics narrated. The defending force requested immediate medical evacuation. The humans provided it and captured the position without firing a single shot. That's not military tactics, Zethkar protested. That's psychological warfare, biological manipulation, information operations, social engineering. Lyrics' voice was grim. Admiral, humans don't distinguish between different types of warfare. To them, everything is a weapon if you use it correctly. The recordings continued. Human cadets turning training exercises into collaborative operations with their supposed enemies, using administrative bureaucracy to delay opposing forces, exploiting psychological weaknesses in alien instructors, creating improvised weapons from medical supplies. In one particularly disturbing example, a human cadet named Janet Liu had won a tactical simulation by convincing the computer running the exercise that it was experiencing a system error. She had exploited the artificial intelligence's diagnostic protocols to grant herself administrative access to the simulation. She hacked the training system, Zethkar said numbly, during the exercise, while under fire. In approximately 4 minutes. Zethkar realized his hands were shaking. Everything he thought he understood about warfare, about military doctrine, about the nature of conflict itself was crumbling around him. Lyrics, he said slowly, What do human military strategists consider to be the most important principle of warfare? According to their primary strategic manual, there are no rules in war except victory or defeat. Everything else is suggestion. The Impecadon to the second. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Zethkar understood now why his earlier conversation with the human officers had felt so strange. They hadn't been evasive about their capabilities. They hadn't been genuinely confused by his questions. To them, adapting to impossible circumstances wasn't a special ability. It was just what soldiers did. "Admiral," Lyric said quietly, "there's something else. I accessed their historical military records. And humans have been fighting continuously for their entire recorded history. Major conflicts every few decades, minor skirmishes constantly. They've developed weapons that could sterilize their entire planet, and they've used them against each other." He showed a timeline of human military history. Wars that spanned continents, conflicts that lasted decades, battles that involved hundreds of millions of combatants. They fought a global war that lasted 6 years and involved every nation on their planet, Lyrics continued. Another conflict where they developed weapons that could destroy cities with single bombs. Breeds. They've created biological agents that could wipe out their entire species. And they stopped themselves? Zethkar asked hopefully. Outbreak. They just got better at controlling the damage. Their most recent major conflict was fought with conventional weapons. But the casualty figures? She paused. 73 million dead. They called it a limited engagement. Zethkar felt the universe tilting around him. The humans' casual competence in battle, their impossible innovations, their refusal to acknowledge defeat, it all made sense now. They weren't naturally gifted at warfare. They were naturally gifted at surviving warfare. "How many major conflicts have they fought?" he asked. Conservative estimate? Approximately 12,000 significant military engagements in the last 4,000 years. That's an average of one major conflict every 4 months. The number was incomprehensible. The hegemony had fought perhaps 50 major conflicts in its entire 3,000-year history. The idea of a species that treated warfare as a regular occurrence rather than an exceptional crisis was beyond his ability to process. What's their current military doctrine based on? Lyrics manipulated the display to show recent human strategic documents. Learning from their most recent peer conflict, they fought against themselves for 18 months using weapons and tactics that made previous wars look like children's games. The recordings from that conflict were classified at levels that required special clearance even for Zethkar to view. What he saw made him understand why the humans had seemed so unconcerned by the Devourer swarm's capabilities. Compared to what they did to each other, the Devourers were almost gentle. "Admiral," Lyric said softly, "I don't think they see this as a war." "What do you mean?" "Based on their military communications, their casualty projections, their resource allocation, I think they see this as a police action, a minor operation against a moderately challenging opponent." Zethkar closed all 4 of his eyes and tried to imagine what human military operations would look like if they considered their current enemy to be a serious threat. The thought made him nauseous. "Commander," he said finally, "send a priority communication to Hegemony Command. Classification Level 9. "What should I tell them, Admiral?" Zethkar looked out at the fleet of ships surrounding them. Krillian battle cruisers, Veltar carriers, Thorkin assault ships, vessels representing the pinnacle of military technology developed by civilizations with thousands of years of experience. And scattered among them, almost invisible by comparison, were the human ships. Small, efficient vessels that somehow consistently achieved the impossible. "Tell them," he said quietly, "that we need to reconsider our relationship with humanity. Tell them that what we thought was an alliance between equals is actually—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Actually what, Admiral?" "Actually us being protected by something that makes the Devourer swarm look like a minor inconvenience." As Lyrics left to compose the message, Zethkar remained at his observation window, watching human patrol ships glide silently through the fleet formation. Their movements were graceful, almost casual, but he could see the tactical perfection in every maneuver. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of sensor range, the Devourer swarm was preparing its next assault. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever known was gathering forces that could consume entire star systems, and humanity was treating it like a training exercise. The thought that should have been comforting instead filled him with a dread that went deeper than any fear of the Devourers ever had. Admiral Zethkar's sleep had been haunted by nightmares of endless human conflicts, each more devastating than anything the hegemony had ever conceived. He woke to emergency alerts flooding his quarters communication system. The Devourer swarm had launched its largest assault in 3 centuries, a concentrated attack on the Kepler defense grid that protected 12 inhabited systems. "Admiral, to the bridge," came Commander Lyrix's urgent voice. "A priority alpha emergency." Zethkar arrived on the bridge to find controlled chaos. Tactical displays showed the approaching Devourer fleet, over 3,000 vessels of various classes, including several of the massive harvester ships that could strip a planet bare in hours. The projected casualty figures were staggering. "Estimated time to contact?" he asked, taking his position at the command center. 4 hours, 17 minutes, replied Lieutenant Krixnow, the Velter tactical officer. "Hegemony Command has authorized full defensive deployment." The main display showed friendly forces moving into position. It was the largest concentration of hegemony military power ever assembled, nearly 800 ships representing the finest vessels from 15 different species. The tactical formation was perfect, a masterpiece of coordinate defense that had taken decades to develop. "Human force disposition?" Zethkar asked, though he already suspected the answer. "They've declined to integrate with the main defense formation," Lyrix reported. "Captain Chen transmitted their response an hour ago." The recorded message played on the bridge speakers. Captain Chen's voice was calm, almost conversational. "Hegemony Command, this is Human Task Force 7. We appreciate the tactical coordination offer, but we'll be conducting independent operations. Please maintain your formation, and we'll try not to get in your way."
Try not to get in their way.
As if the largest Devourer assault in history was a minor inconvenience that might disrupt hegemony operations. "How many human ships?" Zethkar asked. 23 vessels, Krixnow replied. 12 destroyers, 8 frigates, 2 carriers, and 1 command ship. Total crew complement approximately 8,000. The numbers were absurd. The humans were planning to engage a force that outnumbered them 130 to 1 with the casual confidence of a training exercise. By every rational calculation, they would be destroyed within minutes of entering weapon range. "Sir," Communications Officer Velthara interrupted. "Incoming transmission from the human command ship. It's addressed to you personally." Captain Chen's face appeared on the screen, and Zethkar was struck again by how young she looked. Human lifespans were shorter than most hegemony species, but even accounting for that, Chen appeared to be barely past adolescence by alien standards. "Admiral Zethkar," she said with a slight smile, "I thought you might want to observe our operations firsthand. Raise. Would you like to transfer your flag to our ship for the duration of the engagement?" The invitation was delivered with such casual politeness that it took Zethkar a moment to process what she was asking. She wanted him to abandon his position with the main hegemony fleet and join a hopelessly outnumbered human force about to engage in what amounted to suicide. "Captain, while I appreciate the offer, my duty is with the main defensive formation. But if you change your mind, we'll have a shuttle standing by. Things are going to get interesting in the next few hours, and I think you might learn something valuable about human military doctrine." The transmission ended, leaving Zethkar staring at the blank screen. There was something in Chen's tone, a certainty that went beyond confidence into the realm of absolute knowledge. She wasn't hoping for victory or even planning for it. She was stating it as an established fact. "Admiral," Lyrix said quietly, "recommend we maintain position with the main fleet. Assessments have been unconventional." Zethkar was about to agree when the tactical display updated with new information. The Devourer fleet had accelerated their approach and changed formation. Instead of the standard assault pattern, they were deploying in a configuration that would allow them to bypass the main hegemony defensive line and strike directly at the populated systems behind it. "Be faced against us," Krixnow observed. "Our formation is too concentrated to respond to a flanking maneuver of that scale." The revelation hit the bridge like a physical blow. The careful tactical formation that represented centuries of military doctrine was about to become a liability. The hegemony fleet would have to choose between maintaining their defensive positions and pursuing the Devourer force. Either choice would result in catastrophic losses. But the human ships were positioned perfectly to intercept the Devourer flanking maneuver. Was this planned? Zethkar asked, though he already knew the answer. It meant that human ships began moving to intercept positions 47 minutes ago, Lyrics confirmed. Before the Devourer course change was detected by our sensors.
The implications were staggering.
Either the humans had intelligence capabilities far beyond anything the hegemony possessed, or they had predicted the Devourer tactics based purely on tactical analysis. Sir, Velterra said urgently, Captain Chen is transmitting again. Chen's face reappeared, but now she was clearly on the bridge of her ship during combat preparations. Humans moved efficiently in the background, their actions choreographed with the precision of a dance. Admiral, last chance. You wanted to understand human military doctrine? You're about to see it in action. Your shuttle bay is prepped for immediate departure. Zethkar looked around his bridge at the faces of his officers, each representing different species, different military traditions, different ways of understanding warfare. They were competent, experienced, and completely out of their depth. Maintain fleet position, he told Lyrics. I'll be back before the main engagement begins. The shuttle flight to the human command ship took 12 minutes, during which Zethkar had an excellent view of the approaching Devourer fleet. The enemy formation was indeed massive, their ships moving with the coordinated precision of a hive mind. Against any conventional force, they would be unstoppable. The human command ship, UES Indomitable, was smaller than Zethkar had expected. Where hegemony vessels emphasized impressive size and overwhelming firepower, the human ship seemed designed for efficiency and speed. As his shuttle docked, he noticed details that revealed the fundamental difference in design philosophy. External weapon mounts that could be reconfigured during flight, armor plating that appeared to be modular, and engine systems that looked like they had been redesigned recently. Captain Chen met him at the airlock, dressed in combat gear that looked deceptively casual.
Welcome aboard, Admiral.
I hope you're ready for an education. The bridge of the Indomitable was unlike anything Zethkar had ever seen. Instead of the rigid hierarchy of alien ships, humans moved with fluid coordination, switching roles and responsibilities as the situation demanded. Impressive. Information flowed through spoken updates, hand signals, and subtle body language that created a level of communication efficiency that his tactical mind found both impressive and unsettling. Tactical overview, Chen called out as they entered. Devourer force maintaining course and speed, replied a young human male at the sensor station. 3,047 vessels confirmed. Estimated engagement in 93 minutes. Hegemony main fleet holding defensive formation. Hegemony main fleet holding defensive formation as predicted. Our task force is in optimal intercept position. Turned to Zethkar with an expression that might have been apologetic. Admiral, what I'm about to show you has been classified by your own government. But given current circumstances, I think you need to see the complete picture. She gestured to the main tactical display, which shifted to show intelligence reports that Zethkar had never seen before. Detailed analysis of Devourer tactical patterns, psychological assessments of their collective decision-making processes, and most disturbing of all, projections of their likely strategic goals. You've been fighting them for 3 centuries, Chen said, but you've been fighting them wrong. The display showed historical data from hundreds of previous Devourer engagements. A pattern emerged that Zethkar had never noticed. The swarm's attacks weren't random or opportunistic. Daily, they were testing responses. Learning, building a comprehensive model of hegemony military capabilities. They've been preparing for this assault for decades, Chen continued. Every engagement, every tactical exchange, every casualty has been providing them data for this moment. They know exactly how you'll respond because you've been showing them for 300 years. It was devastating. The hegemony's proud military tradition, their hegemony's proud military tradition, their proven tactics, their technological superiority, all of it had become a weapon in the Devourer's hands. But they don't know how humans fight, Zethkar said, understanding finally dawning. They have no data on us at all, Chen confirmed. Until 8 months ago, we didn't exist in their awareness. They can't predict our tactics because we don't have any. No tactics? No fixed tactics. No doctrine they can learn. No predictable responses they can counter. Chen's smile was suddenly sharp. Admiral, you've seen our combat reports. You know what we're capable of. But what you haven't understood is that we're not using advanced technology or superior training. Then what? We're using the one advantage the Devourers can't adapt to: chaos. Instead of the clean formations that characterized military operations, the human ships were scattered in what appeared to be random positions. No two vessels were following the same flight path. No standard attack patterns were evident. "This is your battle plan?" Zethkar asked incredulously. Chen corrected.
This is our opening position, Chen corrected.
"The battle plan will be developed during the engagement, based on real-time assessment of enemy responses and environmental factors." "That's impossible. You can't coordinate a fleet action without predetermined tactical structure." A new voice joined the conversation. "Actually, Admiral, that's exactly what we can't do." Zethkar turned to see Dr. Sarah Martinez, the human fleet's senior tactical advisor. Her appearance was even more unsettling than the casual confidence of the military personnel. She looked like a civilian academic, not a combat strategist. "Martinez is our chaos theorist," Chen explained. "She specializes in non-linear tactical dynamics. I study how to win fights that can't be won," Martinez said with a smile that reminded Zethkar uncomfortably of a predator. Teary-eyed, the Devourers are operating under the assumption that warfare follows predictable patterns. They're right, for every species except us. Display, showing mathematical models that hurt Zethkar's brain to look at. Human tactical doctrine is based on the principle that the only way to win against a superior adaptive enemy is to be more adaptive than they are. We don't just change our tactics, we change the nature of the conflict itself. 30 minutes to contact, announced the sensor operator. "Time to see the theory in practice," Chen said. "Admiral, you might want to take a seat. This is going to be unlike anything you've experienced." The next few minutes passed in apparent calm. The human crew continued their preparations with the same casual efficiency, but Zethkar could feel the tension building. Ability continued its approach, their formation perfect and their course unwavering. "Contact in 60 seconds, came the announcement. "Ships, execute pattern random 7, Chen ordered. Zethkar watched in fascination as the human fleet began moving in what appeared to be complete chaos. Ships accelerated in different directions, some toward the enemy, others perpendicular to the approach vector. A few actually began moving away from the battle zone entirely. "What is pattern random 7, he asked. "There is no pattern random 7, Chen replied calmly. "That's the point." The first exchange of weapons fire began 20 seconds later. Devourer ships opened with their standard energy weapons, targeting human vessels based on predicted flight paths. Every shot missed. The human response was unlike anything in Zethkar's experience. Instead of returning fire with their main weapons, they began launching what appeared to be garbage into space. Metal debris, empty fuel containers, and what looked like pieces of hull plating scattered in seemingly random directions. "What are they doing?" Zethkar demanded. "Creating a tactical environment that favors improvisation over planning," Dr. Martinez explained. "The debris field will force both sides to navigate unpredictably, but we're better at unpredictable than they are." They began adapting immediately, their formation shifting to account for the debris field. It was exactly the wrong response, now Chen said quietly. The human ships that had been retreating from the battle suddenly reversed course and accelerated directly into the heart of the Devourer formation. The vessels that had been moving perpendicular to the attack vector began a coordinated assault on the enemy's flanks. The ships that had seemed to be advancing randomly revealed that their chaotic movement had positioned them perfectly to exploit weaknesses in the adapted Devourer formation. "Impossible," Zethkar whispered. "Not impossible," Chen corrected. Just very, very difficult to predict." What followed was the most beautiful and terrifying display of warfare Zethkar had ever witnessed. The human fleet moved like a living thing, each ship responding to micro-changes in the tactical situation with fluid grace. They didn't follow a plan. They created the plan as they executed it, adapting faster than the Devourers could process their responses. A human destroyer found itself surrounded by 6 Devourer cruisers. Instead of fighting or fleeing, it began broadcasting what appeared to be a surrender signal. When the enemy ships moved to capture it, the destroyer detonated its own reactor, not to destroy itself, but to create an electromagnetic pulse that disabled the Devourer's ship's coordination systems. A human boarding party then captured all 6 vessels in less than 4 minutes. A human frigate engaged a massive Devourer battleship in single combat. The disparity in firepower was so extreme that the engagement should have lasted seconds. Instead, the frigate began using the battleship's own weapon systems against it, somehow causing the enemy's energy beams to feed back into its own power systems. The battleship destroyed itself trying to kill a ship 1/10 its size. But the most disturbing example came when a group of human ships encountered a Devourer formation that had learned from previous engagements and adapted its tactics specifically to counter human unpredictability. The humans' response was to become even more unpredictable. They began fighting each other. Zethkar watched in horrors as human ships opened fire on their own forces, creating a 3-way battle that made no tactical sense whatsoever. The Devourers, programmed to exploit chaos, moved to take advantage of the apparent human civil war. It was a trap that utilized the Devourer's own adaptive capabilities against them. The civil war was a coordinated deception that drew enemy forces into a killing ground where human ships that had been fighting each other suddenly coordinated their fire to eliminate the Devourer vessels caught between them.
You made them think you were fighting each other, Zethkar said numbly.
We were fighting each other, Chen replied. The weapons fire was real, the damage was real, and the tactical situation was genuinely chaotic. But we're better at fighting in chaos than anyone else in the galaxy. Even against your own forces, especially against our own forces. We've had a lot of practice. The battle lasted 3 hours and 17 minutes. When it ended, over 90% of the Devourer fleet had been destroyed or captured. Human casualties numbered 43 wounded and 12 dead. Losses so light that they would be considered impossible by any reasonable tactical assessment. How? Zethkar asked, staring at the aftermath displayed on the tactical screen. Because they tried to fight us the way they fight everyone else, Chen answered. They adapted their tactics based on our initial responses, then adapted again when we changed, then adapted again when we changed again. By the time they realized we weren't following any consistent pattern, they had adapted themselves into tactical configurations that made them vulnerable to approaches they'd never considered. Doctored battle analysis. The Devourer's primary strength is their ability to learn from enemy actions and develop countermeasures. But that strength becomes a weakness when facing an enemy that deliberately avoids consistency. You turn their adaptation against them. We turn their intelligence against them. Shen corrected. Intelligence is only useful if you can predict behavior based on previous data. Against an enemy that deliberately maintains unpredictability, intelligence becomes a liability. Zethkar looked around the human bridge, trying to understand what he had just witnessed. These people had turned the greatest military threat the galaxy had ever known into a tactical exercise. They had taken an enemy force that outnumbered them by orders of magnitude and destroyed it through pure creativity and tactical chaos. And they had done it while making it look easy. Captain, he said quietly, what would happen if humanity ever decided that the hegemony was a threat? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Chen's expression grew thoughtful, and for a moment Zethkar saw something in her eyes that terrified him more than any Devourer assault. Admiral, she said gently, that's a hypothetical situation that I hope we never have to explore. But as Zethkar prepared to return to his own ship, he realized that the question was no longer hypothetical. It was inevitable, because sometime, somehow, humanity would encounter a situation where their interests and the hegemony's interests would conflict. And when that day came, the galaxy would learn that the Devourer swarm had been the least of their problems. 6 weeks after the Battle of Kepler Grid, Admiral Zethkar found himself in a position he had never imagined, sitting across from the Hegemony Supreme Council, preparing to deliver a report that would fundamentally alter the course of galactic civilization. The council chamber was a masterpiece of architectural intimidation, designed to reinforce the authority of the 15 species that had governed the galaxy for 3 millennia. Representatives from each member civilization sat in carefully arranged positions, that reflected their military contributions and political influence. At the center, the crystalline form of High Chancellor Vexana pulsed with a cold light that indicated deep concentration. Admiral Zethkar, the Chancellor's voice resonated through harmonic frequencies that could be heard by all species present. Your preliminary reports regarding human military capabilities have been concerning. Please provide a complete assessment. Becoming heavier than usual. Around the chamber, representatives of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations waited for his words. Beings who commanded star fleets, ruled entire sectors, and had never known defeat in their long expansion across the stars. They had no idea what they were about to learn. Honored counselors, he began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to reveal. My assessment is that humanity represents the most significant shift in galactic power dynamics since the founding of the hegemony. Chancellor Vexana's crystalline structure brightened slightly, a sign of increased attention. Elaborate, Admiral. Zethkar activated the chamber's holographic display, showing tactical footage from recent engagements. In the past 8 months, human forces have participated in 412 separate military actions against the Devourer swarm. Their success rate is 90 to 7.4%. BCOs consistently exceed our best theoretical projections by factors of 10 to 50. These numbers are impressive, acknowledged Counselor Thorak, the Krillian representative whose people prided themselves on military excellence. Performance in specific circumstances does not necessarily indicate. Counselor, Zethkar interrupted gently. These are not specific circumstances. Humans achieve these results regardless of enemy strength, tactical situation, or operational complexity. They do not appear to have performance limitations in the conventional sense. The silence that followed was profound. Chancellor Vexana's light shifted to a deeper spectrum, the equivalent of a frown. Explain, no conventional limitations, Admiral. Zethkar manipulated the display to show comparative analysis charts. Every military force in the hegemony operates within predictable parameters. Krillian forces excel at coordinated operations, but struggle with rapid tactical adaptation. The Veltar units demonstrate superior strategic planning, but limited individual initiative. Thorkin warriors achieve exceptional individual performance, but have difficulty with complex coordination. He paused, letting the familiar patterns settle in the Council's collective awareness. Humans appear to excel at everything simultaneously. They tactical adaptation, strategic planning, and coordinated operations at levels that should be mutually exclusive. More significantly, their performance improves under pressure rather than degrading. Bodio hegemony leaned forward in her hover chair. Are you suggesting that humans are naturally superior warriors, Admiral? No, Counselor. I'm suggesting that they are naturally superior at warfare itself. The distinction was subtle but critical, and Zethkar could see several council members struggling to understand the difference. Program. Warriors fight, he explained, but warfare is more than fighting. It encompasses logistics, psychology, innovation, adaptation, and most critically, the ability to redefine the nature of conflict itself. Humans don't just fight wars, they think warfare. He activated a new section of the display showing intelligence reports that had taken weeks to compile. I have spent considerable time studying human military history. The pieces has been engaged in continuous warfare for their entire evolutionary development. Not occasional conflicts over resources or territory, but constant, innovative, adaptive warfare against enemies who shared their intelligence and capabilities. B. The implications began to register around the chamber. Species that had conquered their homeworlds through technological or physical superiority suddenly understood that they were dealing with something unprecedented. B. Show them the psychological profiles, came a new voice. The council turned to see Captain Sarah Chen entering the chamber, flanked by 2 human Marines whose presence somehow managed to be both respectful and menacing. She had been invited to provide testimony, but her early arrival suggested careful timing. Captain Chen, Chancellor Vexana, acknowledged. We welcome your perspective on Admiral Zethkar's assessment. Chen approached the center of the chamber with the easy confidence that characterized her species. Thank you, Chancellor. Admiral Zethkar's analysis is accurate but incomplete. He's been studying what humans can do. I think you need to understand what humans will do. She gestured to the holographic display, which shifted to show psychological and cultural data that had been classified at the highest levels. Every species in the hegemony developed spaceflight as an extension of their natural expansion instincts, Chen began. You reached for the stars because it was the logical next step in your evolution. Humans developed spaceflight because we were running out of room to fight each other on our own planet. The statement hung in the air like an accusation. Counselor Thorak's massive frame shifted uncomfortably. Are you saying your species views space exploration as a form of warfare? I'm saying we view everything as a potential form of warfare, Chen replied calmly. Exploration, trade, diplomacy, cultural exchange, scientific research. We approach all of them with the understanding that they might become conflicts and prepare accordingly. Unlike the orderly, systematic approach taken by hegemony species, human expansion looked chaotic and aggressive, with multiple competing factions establishing settlements that sometimes fought each other even as they cooperated against external threats. This appears highly inefficient, observed Counselor Velfon, the economic representative whose people had optimized resource distribution across 17 star systems. Inefficient but anti-fragile, Chen agreed. Our expansion model assumes that some colonies will fail, some will be destroyed, and some will become enemies. We plan for civil war, external invasion, and complete systems failure. Every human settlement can function independently and defend itself against any conceivable threat. Chancellor Vexana's light shifted to an alarmed frequency. Buster, including threats from other human settlements? Especially threats from other human settlements. We know how we think, how we fight, and how we adapt. Preparing for war against ourselves means we're prepared for war against anyone. Admiral Zethkar resumed control of the presentation, showing strategic assessments that had kept him awake for weeks. Counselors, this brings me to the critical point of my report. Captain Chen's people are not just our allies in the current conflict. They represent a fundamental change in the galactic balance of power. Produce, distributions across the galaxy. The hegemony controlled approximately 60% of inhabited systems through a combination of technological superiority and coordinated military action. Various independent civilizations controlled another 30%. The remaining 10% was contested or uninhabitable. These percentages have remained stable for over 1,000 years, Zethkar noted. The addition of human forces changes everything. New projections appeared, showing potential scenarios if human military capabilities were fully deployed across the galaxy. The results were staggering. If humans chose to expand aggressively, using their current tactical doctrines and adapting them for large-scale operations, they could control the majority of inhabited systems within 50 years. That assumes they could maintain their current performance ratios, Counselor Lithara pointed out. Surely their methods cannot scale indefinitely. Captain Chen's expression shifted slightly, the predatory smile that had begun to haunt Zethkar's dreams. Actually, Counselor, our methods improve with scale. But the larger the conflict, the more opportunities for innovation and adaptation. What you've seen so far is what we can accomplish with limited resources against a relatively predictable enemy. Showing theoretical projections that made the council chamber fall completely silent. This is what human military operations would look like against multiple adaptive opponents with comparable intelligence and resources. And the tactical scenarios that followed were beyond anything in the hegemony's experience. Multi-dimensional warfare that incorporated economic manipulation, cultural subversion, technological innovation, and psychological operations on a scale that dwarfed traditional military action. Conflicts where victory was achieved before the enemy realized they were at war. You're describing the complete destruction of existing galactic civilization, Chancellor Vexana observed, her harmonic voice carrying undertones of something approaching fear.
No, Chancellor, Chen corrected gently.
I'm describing its evolution, Rick. Humans don't seek to destroy existing civilizations. We seek to outcompete them. The result looks similar, but the process is entirely different. Admiral Zethkar stepped forward, knowing that what he said next would determine the future of galactic politics. Counselors, I believe we face a choice that will define the next 1,000 years of galactic history.
He manipulated the display to show two distinct scenarios,
The first showed continued cooperation between humanity and the hegemony, with human tactical innovations gradually being adopted by alien forces. The second showed what would happen if relations between humanity and the hegemony deteriorated into conflict. Scenario 1 results in a hybrid civilization that combines the best aspects of human adaptability with hegemony stability. Military threats like the Devourer swarm become manageable problems rather than existential crises. Exploration and expansion accelerate dramatically. Everyone benefits. The chamber's attention focused on the second scenario, and the atmosphere grew noticeably tenser. Scenario 2 results in the complete restructuring of galactic civilization under human dominance. Not through conquest in the traditional sense, but through competitive displacement. Humans simply become better at everything we do, faster than we can adapt to match them. The silence stretched for long minutes. Finally, Counselor Torak spoke, his voice carrying the weight of a warrior who had finally encountered something beyond his understanding. "What do you recommend, Admiral?" Zethkar looked around the chamber, taking in the faces of beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia and were just now realizing that their reign was ending. "I recommend we choose Scenario 1 while we still have the opportunity to choose." The Admiral is wise. Humans prefer cooperation to competition, but we're very good at both. And if we choose poorly? Chancellor Vexana asked. Chen's expression grew thoughtful. Then you'll discover that what you've seen so far, our performance against the Devourer swarm, our tactical innovations, our casual disregard for impossible odds, represents roughly 10% of human military potential. We've been holding back, Chen explained simply. The current conflict didn't require our full attention. But a war against the hegemony would be different. It would be fought by humans who were taking it seriously. Character, the threat was delivered with such gentle politeness that it took several seconds for the full implications to register. When they did, Zethkar saw something in the council members' expressions that he had never seen before. The look of apex predators realizing they were no longer at the top of the food chain. A continued cooperation. Chancellor Vexana asked, her voice carefully controlled. Full integration, Chen replied immediately. Joint tactical training, shared technological development, coordinated expansion planning, and most importantly, recognition that this is a partnership between equals rather than humans serving as auxiliaries to hegemony forces.
Equals, Counselor Thorak repeated slowly.
Equals, Chen confirmed. Anything else is temporary.
The peace and reliable. Humans don't remain subordinate for long. It's not how we're built. You can have us as partners or competitors, but not as servants. Watch the council members exchange glances, communications, and subtle signals. The decision they were making would echo across the galaxy for generations. The Admiral. Chancellor Vexana said finally, implement integration protocols immediately. Captain Chen, please prepare recommendations for joint tactical doctrine development. As the formal session concluded, Zethkar remained in the chamber with Captain Chen. The human officer was studying the architectural details with the professional assessment of someone evaluating defensive positions. Captain, he said quietly, was that a negotiation or a surrender? Chen's smile was genuinely warm for the first time since he had met her.
Admiral, with humans there's rarely a difference.
We prefer win-win scenarios, but we're very good at making sure we're one of the wins. She turned toward the exit, then paused. Admiral, there's something else you should know. Something that didn't come up in the briefing. Yes, humanity isn't expanding into the galaxy alone. We're bringing our entire ecosystem with us. Our cultures, our philosophies, our approaches to problems that have nothing to do with warfare. What you've seen is just the military aspect of human civilization. The implications of that statement sent a chill down Zethkar's spine. If human approaches to warfare were this disruptive, what would their approaches to economics, governance, science, and social organization do to galactic civilization? How disruptive will the complete integration be, he asked. Captain Chen paused at the chamber entrance, her expression thoughtful. Admiral, in 50 years the galaxy will be unrecognizable, but it will also be stronger, more adaptable and more capable of facing whatever challenges emerge from deep space. And if those challenges include other species like humanity, her smile became sharp again, then the galaxy will be ready for them. Because by then, Everyone will think a little bit like humans. Admiral Zethkar remained alone with the holographic displays showing humanity's impact on galactic civilization. The projections were beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, a future where the comfortable certainties of the past gave way to endless adaptation and growth. He realized that Captain Chen had been right about one thing. The galaxy would be unrecognizable in 50 years. But perhaps that was exactly what it needed to survive whatever lay beyond the known stars. The age of human influence had begun, and there would be no turning back. In the depths of space, unknown to both the hegemony and humanity, ancient eyes watched the proceedings with interest. The galaxy was indeed changing, becoming something stronger and more adaptable. Soon it would be ready for the real tests that lay ahead. But those were challenges for another day and another story. For now, the galaxy would learn to adapt to its newest and most dangerous children. And perhaps, in time, it would be grateful for the lesson.